This story is about a group of human combat medics who fight in a brutal war against an alien enemy called the Zevantai. These humans have strange and powerful medical skills. They don't just save lives, they turn wounded soldiers into super strong fighters who refuse to die. The enemy soldiers are terrified of these medics because they bring back their friends from the dead and make them even more dangerous. The story is very exciting and full of action, with a mix of intense battles, clever tactics, and strange human medical science. The stakes are very high because the humans are fighting not only to survive but to show the galaxy that their stubborn spirit and care for each other make them unstoppable. The war on Maraxis Prime burned like a slow fire that never died out. The sky was thick with smoke and ash. Buildings were broken and crumbled like toys left in the dirt. The air smelled sharp and bitter like metal burning. Somewhere inside the ruined city, Sergeant Vivian Stitch Malloy crawled through the rubble. Her medkit bounced at her side, full of strange mixes of human and alien technology. Vivian was a combat medic, but not like any the Zevantai had seen before. Her medkit was a deadly weapon and so was she. "Hold your guts in, Morrison," Vivian shouted as she slid past broken walls. Her voice was sharp and full of pain and hope at the same time. She found Corporal Morrison, lying on the ground with his intestines hanging out. He was trying to push them back inside while firing his plasma rifle with the other hand. "It's going to hurt," she warned, pulling a syringe from her vest. The needle was marked, "Do not use except in case of apocalypse." Morrison only grinned and nodded, too stubborn to give up. Vivian jabbed the syringe into Morrison's neck. Almost instantly, his eyes went wide and his pupils grew black. Then he screamed, not from pain but something close to joy. The Zevantai soldier advancing down the hall stopped, his 4 pupils shrinking in fear. Morrison stood up, dripping blood and laughing. He grabbed a piece of rebar and charged. The Zevantai soldiers were trained to hold their ground. But instinct told them to run. Most chose to flee but not fast enough. Morrison smashed through them, laughing wildly as plasma fire echoed in the ruins. Vivian was already there, cauterizing his wounds with a field torch. "You said it would hurt," he said between laughs. "I lied," Vivian answered. "It's supposed to hurt more. Your nervous system is fried. Sit still while I patch you up." Morrison laughed again, a wild, crazy sound that had become the 77th Hellborn's battle cry. Far away, Private Rick Solon watched the fight through his scope. His 4 pupils were wide with shock. "Target acquired," whispered his squad mate. "Clean shot on the medic." "No," Rick said quickly. "Standing orders. We don't engage human medics." "Since when?" the other whispered. "They're not just saving lives anymore. They're creating weapons." Rick remembered the first time he saw the 77th Hellborn medics in action. One soldier, missing both legs, crawled 50 meters and beat a Zevantai officer to death with his own severed foot. It was not a battle of soldiers. It was a war of the impossible. Rick's scope tracked Vivian as she finished patching Morrison. The wounded man stood, shaking but alive, and picked up 2 plasma rifles. The Zevantai soldiers froze. Their training had no answer for this madness. Suddenly, a plasma bolt flew toward Vivian's head. Morrison screamed, warning her, but she barely moved. The bolt missed, singing her hair. She only tilted her head, listening to music only she could hear. The Zevantai forces began to retreat, their ordered ranks dissolving into chaos. Rick's squad mate lined up another shot. "I'm taking the medic." Rick grabbed his arm. "No. Pull back." Too late. The shot fired, but Vivian moved with impossible speed, dodging with calm and terrifying grace. "She's not human," Rick whispered. Back in the ruins, the 77th Hellborn laughed as they fought and healed. One by one, the wounded returned to the fight, stronger and angrier than before. Vivian worked quickly, jabbing syringes full of strange drugs and stitching torn flesh. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body," she said. "And if too much leaves, I just put some back in." She smiled fiercely and moved through the battlefield like a storm, healing and fighting all at once. The Zevantai tried gas attacks next. A cloud of sweet-smelling poison rolled over the battlefield. The Zevantai expected humans to fall unconscious, but the 77th just laughed and kept fighting. Their medics had counteragents and drugs that made the gas feel like morning fog. Rick watched as his own commander was knocked out and then beaten by a smiling private who apologized between punches. The Zevantai began to realize that human combat medicine was a weapon unlike any other. It was not just saving lives, it was making warriors who refused to die. Rick found himself captured and taken to a strange medical bay that looked like a hospital crashed into a weapons depot. Vivian greeted him with a syringe and a grin. "Welcome to the 77th, she said. The drugs hit Rick's system like a flood of colors and sounds. His body felt strange and new. "You can fight if you want, or you can fight anyway," Vivian said. Rick's mind raced. He had been a proper soldier. Now he was part of something chaotic and dangerous. He was learning that human medicine was not just science. It was madness, hope, and fury wrapped into one. Outside, Marax's Prime still burned. The war was far from over, but the humans had a new weapon. They carried medkits, and wherever they went, enemy soldiers fled. Because the humans would not let their own die. Not ever. The dropship shook violently as it closed in on Marax's Prime. Inside, the 77th Hellborn prepared for another impossible mission. Among them, Rick Solon sat quietly, still adjusting to the strange mix of fear and adrenaline that now pulsed through his body. For pupils, enhanced senses, and enough drugs running through his veins to kill a small moon. Yet he felt strangely alive. "Listen up, meat sacks," Lieutenant Cade Broner barked, pacing the cramped cabin. "We're storming St. Maurice Medical Complex. That fortress-turned-hospital is crawling with Zevantai guards. Our target, Dr. Abby Pastors. She's alive, just barely. And she's got prototype augmentations that could change the war." Rick swallowed hard. "Is she really alive?" Broner shrugged. "Technically. That means we get her out. Or die trying." Vivian Malloy, ever chaotic and sharp, grinned at Rick. "You're our cultural advisor now. Figure out the safe corridors and where they hide the traps." Rick nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility. The Zevantai were strange and deeply superstitious. Knowing their habits might save their lives. The dropship lurched as it entered the atmosphere. Morrison, with his twisted torso and patched-up guts, grinned. "You ready to see how I bend the rules?" he asked, cracking his neck in ways that made Rick's spine ache. Vivian sighed but smiled. "Just don't break yourself before we land." The ship slammed into the ruined city. Explosions rocked the walls as the 77th spilled out into the chaos. "Stay close," Vivian ordered. "This is going to get messy." The team moved through dark corridors filled with shattered medical equipment, and the lingering smell of antiseptic turned sour with blood. Every step was a test of nerves and strength. Suddenly, alarms blared. The Zevantai were ready. "Contact front," someone shouted. Plasma fire erupted. The 77th responded with controlled madness. Fighting, healing, moving forward. Rick watched as Vivian performed field surgery while dodging blasts. She stabbed syringes into wounded soldiers, stitching limbs and shouting orders all at once. "This is medicine," she said fiercely, "not a hospital job. It's combat engineering." One soldier, Jackson, used his own severed foot as a weapon while hopping on a prosthetic leg. His laughter echoed through the halls. Rick was in awe and horror. The Zevantai deployed their elite units, 7-foot-tall warriors in armor that seemed almost invincible. They moved like shadows, crushing everything in their path. Morrison laughed. Time to bend reality. With impossible flexibility, he twisted and bent through their ranks, jamming stimpaks into armor gaps. The elite soldiers began to lose their focus, their perfect discipline cracking under the influence of human combat drugs. One elite warrior giggled. What is this?" Rick felt the madness spread. Vivian was a whirlwind of energy, patching wounds, firing her sidearm, and turning the battlefield into a surgical theater. She even reattached an arm mid-fight, using medical foam and fierce determination. "Why do you do this?" Rick asked, breathless. Vivian's manic grin dimmed for a moment. "Because the alternative is death, clean and quiet. I don't want that. We don't stop. We get angrier. We get better. That's human." The battle raged until the 77th reached the command bridge. General Wieswacher stood there, pale and furious as his forces crumbled before these mad humans. "We will end this," he shouted. But the humans were unstoppable. Vivian treated soldiers who should have been dead many times over. One soldier, shot in the chest 3 times, gasped, sat up, and headbutted the Zevantai soldier who tried to finish him. "Stop dying," Vivian said with a smirk. "It's paperwork I don't want to do." The Zevantai began to retreat in terror from a medic with a field kit and a bad attitude. Rick found himself face to face with Vivian as the battle died down. Blood and grease covered her uniform. "I'm a combat medic," she said quietly. "I took an oath to do no harm. But I'm very bad at following instructions." Rick felt a strange respect. "They fear disorder," he said. "Their whole military is built on control and rules. We bring chaos. That's why they run." Vivian nodded. "Kid learns fast." As the humans regrouped, Morrison twisted his torso in a way that made everyone cringe and marvel. "If you see a human with a medkit, run." The footage of this battle spread quickly through the galaxy. Every army, every mercenary, every pirate learned the same lesson. Human medics are not just healers. They are weapons. Months later, Rick sat in a noisy bar with the 77th Hellborn, Vivian, Morrison, Jackson, and the heavily augmented Dr. Pastors. Aliens gave them a wide berth, wary of the mad humans. "I miss the old days," Morrison said, sipping through a straw that ran through his neck and out his ear. "When people just thought we were crazy. Now they know we're crazy," Jackson laughed, flexing syringes hidden in his prosthetic fingers. Pastors smiled softly. "I've been working on something new. What if the combat drugs were contagious?" "No," they all shouted in unison. Vivian raised her glowing glass. "To the 77th. To the walking wounded. To being too stupid to die and too angry to care." Rick smiled, feeling at home among the chaos. The galaxy would never forget the 77th Hellborn and their terrifying, impossible medics. The days after the battle at St. Maurice Medical Complex blurred into a mix of planning, recovery, and preparation. The 77th Hellborn had become a symbol, a terrifying sign that humans did not just survive war, they thrived in it. Rick Solon still struggled to keep pace with the madness around him. His 4 pupils darted anxiously as he studied maps strewn across the dim light of their temporary base. Vivian and Morrison were deep in conversation, arguing about the best way to bend medical science until it broke the rules of nature itself. Jackson tinkered with his prosthetic arm, syringes clicking open and shut like a sinister orchestra. Rick glanced at Dr. Abby Pastors, who was now walking with the help of her brutal augmentations. Her mechanical limbs moved with terrifying speed and grace. She had volunteered for the enhancements, eager to feel the science firsthand. It showed. "Ready for another mission?" Broner asked, his voice flat but his eyes sharp. "We're going to hit the Zevantai Command Center. Their new orbital bombardment platform makes nukes look like firecrackers. If we don't stop them, Maraxis Prime is toast." Rick's stomach clenched. The stakes were clear. Failure meant death on a scale they had only glimpsed so far. Vivian grinned like she just discovered a new way to break Geneva conventions. "We'll storm the place loaded with every stemmed-up, walking wounded we can find. We're going in loud and stupid." Morrison cracked his neck again, twisting his torso in ways that made Rick wince. "That's Tuesday." The dropship rumbled as it descended toward the Zevantai fortress. Inside, the 77th prepared their drugs and weapons. The air buzzed with nervous energy and a strange camaraderie born of chaos. Rick's role was clear: cultural liaison. He would guide the team through the alien fortress, avoiding traps and sacred sites where the Zevantai dared not fight. It was a job that required more diplomacy than shooting, a fact Rick found both comforting and terrifying. They landed amid explosions and plasma fire. The fortress was a labyrinth of sterile corridors turned into battlegrounds. Medical drones flew through halls, now reprogrammed by Vivian to act as tiny, deadly sentries. "Don't touch that," Vivian warned Rick as he reached for what looked like a seat harness. "That's Morrison's emergency intestine. Don't ask." The team moved fast, their fight filled with equal parts fury and skill. Jackson, hopping on one leg, swung his severed foot like a club, singing old earth shanties as he fought. Rick tried to keep up, his senses overwhelmed by the drugs coursing through his veins. Colors had flavors, sounds had texture, and time felt like a suggestion. The Zevantai unleashed their elite warriors, 7-foot-tall beasts in armor that could shrug off plasma like rain. But even they faltered under the relentless human assault. Morrison twisted and bent, slipping through attacks like a shadow, jamming stimpaks into armor seams. The elite started giggling, their minds unraveling under the influence of human combat drugs. One elite whispered, voice glitching between frequencies, "The walls, they're breathing." Rick lied, "That's normal. Just go with it." The battle became a blur of fire, healing, laughter, and madness. In the heart of the fortress they found Dr. Pastors. She was a whirlwind of augmented limbs, fighting in the past, present, and future all at once. She smashed through walls with brutal efficiency. Vivian worked non-stop, stitching wounds and jabbing stimulants. "If we die medicated," she shouted over the chaos. They fought their way to the hangar with seconds to spare. The dropship waited, engines humming with reckless joy. "Everyone accounted for?" Broner asked. Vivian grinned. "Good enough." The dropship lifted off as the fortress behind them exploded into a fiery blossom. The shockwave tossed the ship like a rag doll, but they held on. Rick looked around at the patchwork crew, humans fused with machines, bodies barely holding together but spirits unbroken. "Welcome to human medicine," Vivian said, handing him a syringe. "The cure's usually worse than the disease. But you'll like it." Rick closed his 4 pupils and wondered if his mother would ever believe what he had become. The 77th Hellborn's legend spread faster than any weapon. Across 3 systems, Zevantai forces retreated when human medics appeared. The simple sight of a medkit sparked panic. Enemy soldiers deserted, whispers spread, "Run when you see a human medic. They don't just heal, they make monsters." Rick Solon, now a seasoned part of the team, sat in the bar on Nexus Station, surrounded by his strange new family. Morrison, hooked up to strange tubes that ran through his neck, smiled through a straw. Jackson's augmented fingers drummed rhythms that could break normal bones. Pastors, her limbs humming with prototype tech, quietly plotted her next breakthrough. "You know what I miss?" Morrison said, voice rough. "When people just thought we were crazy." "Now they know," Jackson laughed, "and it's worse." Vivian raised her glowing glass. "To the 77th Hellborn, the walking wounded, the too stupid to die, the too angry to care." Rick smiled. He had traded a proper military life for madness and miracles. Somehow it felt right. But the war was far from over. Command briefs warned of the Zavanti's newest weapon, an orbital bombardment platform designed to glass entire planets. The humans' response was reckless and brilliant. "We're going to storm their command center," Broner said. "Load up every stemmed-up berserker and launch them like torpedoes." Pure chaos. Rick was assigned to navigate, his enhanced senses piercing walls and traps. The plan was madness, but it was all they had. As they prepared, Rick noticed Pastors working late, her augmentations softly humming. What if the combat drugs could be contagious, she mused. The team groaned in unison. "Why not?" she said with a wicked grin. The assault began with Vivian broadcasting on all channels, her voice calm and deadly. "This is Sergeant Vivian Stitch Malloy of the 77th Hellborn Medical Unit. We're here to discuss your extended warranty, specifically how to avoid it." The dropship crashed through the defensive screen like a needle through skin. Inside, 57 impossible soldiers waited. Humans who should have been corpses, patched up with synthetic skin, biogel, and a refusal to die. The Zevantai forces stopped. Their elite warriors stumbled, their training useless against humans who treated physics like a suggestion and pain like foreplay. Morrison twisted his torso through a blow that should have crushed him. He jammed a stimpack into the gap, and the elite started giggling uncontrollably. Rick found himself guiding the elite through a drug-induced hallucination, talking him down from madness as bullets flew past. Pastors shattered walls with brutal efficiency, fighting in 3 time-space at once. Jackson moved like time bent around him, his prosthetics firing syringes from fingertips. Vivian worked tirelessly, stitching and healing mid-battle. One soldier, technically decapitated, had his head reattached with foam and fury. The command bridge fell. General Wiesvacher, pale and shaking, watched his perfect military machine collapse. "They're human," one officer said. "And that medic, she's looking at me." Vivian waved and shot him with a syringe gun loaded with adrenaline. The commander's eyes widened, then broke into laughter, a sound of a mind unraveling. Rick stepped forward. "They care. That's what makes them terrifying. Every impossible surgery, every berserker, they refuse to let their people go." Vivian smiled fiercely. "Kid learns fast." The Zevantai called off their bombardment and withdrew. Their military manuals were rewritten overnight. If you see a human medic, retreat immediately. Do not engage. Do not observe. Run. Back on Nexus Station, Rick and the 77th drank to survival, madness, and the strange family they had become. Morrison twisted his torso in impossible ways again. "Want to see my new trick?" Rick laughed, feeling at home in the madness. The galaxy feared human medics, but they never understood the true secret. It wasn't the drugs or the augmentations. It was the stubborn refusal to let their people fall. And enough drugs to kill a small moon. The war had changed everything. The Zevantai fleets no longer dared to hold ground when human medics appeared. Entire battle lines broke and ran at the sight of a field kit. The galaxy whispered legends about the 77th Hellborn, the walking wounded who fought like gods, the medics who stitched miracles and madness into flesh. Rick Solon sat with them in the dim light of the bar on Nexus Station, surrounded by chaos and camaraderie. Morrison bent his torso in impossible ways, laughing as he drank through a straw running through his neck. Jackson's prosthetic fingers clicked, launching syringes with deadly precision. Pastors adjusted her augmentations, humming softly like a machine learning to sing. Vivian Stitch Malloy raised her glowing glass. "To us." To the too stubborn to die, the too angry to care, and the medicine that breaks every rule. Rick smiled. This was his family now. The universe might call them mad, but they were the sharp edge of survival. But the war was far from over. The Zevantai were desperate. Their orbital bombardment platforms still hung in space, ready to turn worlds into ashes. The humans' response was fierce, brutal, and full of hope. Operation Reclamation was born. The 77th would storm the Zevantai command center, fueled by drugs wrapped in synthetic skin, and armed with impossible courage. They would break every law of physics and medicine to save their worlds. Rick's role was vital. His enhanced senses pierced walls and traps, guiding the team through alien rituals and deadly corridors. Morrison and Jackson were loaded with stimulants that made time bend and bodies defy injury. Vivian led with her usual fierce grin, stitching wounds mid-battle and laughing through the chaos. Pastor shattered defenses with brutal augmented limbs, moving like a ghost across 3 time spaces. The assault was a storm of blood, laughter, fire, and hope. Morrison twisted and bent through enemy ranks, jamming stimpaks into armor seams and turning the elite warriors into giggling, confused shadows of themselves. Rick talked down a drugged-out giant, calming madness while bullets flew. The Zevantai command fell. General Thesvaker watched his perfect army crumble before humans who should have been corpses 3 times over. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice shaking. Vivian stepped forward, her uniform stained with blood and sweat. "We're medics. We took an oath to do no harm. But we're very bad at following instructions." Rick spoke softly, "They fear what they don't understand. It's not the drugs or the machines. It's the care. The refusal to give up on each other." The Zevantai called off their devastating bombardment and withdrew. Their military doctrines were rewritten in fear and respect. Run from human medics. They do not save lives, they weaponize them. Months passed. The 77th healed, rebuilt, and prepared for what came next. Rick looked around at his comrades, realizing something. They were more than soldiers or medics. They were family. And family fought with everything they had. One night, as the stars shone outside the bar's grimy windows, Morrison raised his glass once more. "To the impossible. To the mad. To us." Rick smiled, raising his own glass. Because the galaxy had learned the hard truth. When you see a human holding a medkit, you run. Not because they heal. Because they refuse to let you live.